Right, hello everyone. Happy May Day. Happy Flora Day. I hope that you're celebrating the ancient Roman festival of the flowers. And isn't it interesting that Moustache Man himself died the day before Labor Day? Is that a coincidence? I don't know, but it is very interesting. Anyway, today, following on from yesterday's video, I would like to talk about the fact that Rome has always been multicultural. Why am I talking about this? Well, yesterday I was talking about Adolf Hitler committing suicide. And I was pointing out that this is not a very Germanic thing to do. This is a Roman thing to do. The ancient Romans, if you look at their history, they have a long history of cutting their wrists. They sit in a warm bath, cut their wrists, the blood comes out, and suicide for them was considered to be an honourable, I don't know about honourable, but a accepted way to go. For the Germans, however, the ancient German pagans, they wished to die in battle so that they could go to Valhalla. This is something which is echoed in the Bhagavad Gita, which states that if a warrior dies in battle, he can easily obtain heaven. So, completely different, two completely different cultures, and it is very interesting that the so-called hero of the Germanic race, the Moustache Man himself, adopted the Roman manner of death. He also adopted the Roman salute. He also adopted Fascism, which is a Roman ideology. Essentially, it was created by Mussolini, and essentially he was copying the Romans of the ancient Roman Republic, who would establish a dictator in a time of war. So it's a bit of socialism mixed with old Roman ideas. And so I suppose National Socialist Germany was really not that German at all, which is kind of fitting in line in that the Germans used to consider themselves to be the Holy Roman Empire, which is kind of amusing. So what I'm trying to say here in this video is that there has always been an ancient civil war, an ancient Germanic war between the northern Germanic people and their culture and the southern people, the Mediterranean people and their culture. Essentially the northerners, well, we follow Germanic paganism or some variant of it, or we can trace our history and our ancestors back to that, back to Odin, back to Woden. Here in England we trace it back to Hengist and Horsa, and in the Mediterranean, they trace everything back to Greece and back to Troy and back to their Trojan ancestors. And of course, this country of ours, Britain, was named after Brutus, who was a Trojan refugee. So we do have a mix of this in our country, but of course we are predominantly German. But the point, my dear friends, the point I'm trying to get at here, the point I'm trying to make is that there has always been this cultural clash, and I consider the Germanic culture to be superior. Or at least, well, if I was born in Rome, I would consider the Roman culture to be superior, wouldn't I? But I'm going to stick with my own people. And the Roman way of doing things has always been multicultural. And it has always clashed with the more ethnocentric way of doing things of the northern Germans. And I say this because if you look at real ancient Rome, even Dardanus, and most people might not realize this, but Dardanus is really the ancient origin of the Roman people. Dardanus was the son of Zeus and Electra, I think it was. And he was born, yes, it was Electra, and he was born in Arcadia. There's some different stories say different things, but generally he's known as being born in Arcadia. Arcadia is an area within the Peloponnese, the island at the bottom of Greece, where the Spartans used to live. It's the central part. It's where the word archaic comes from. It is a wilderness. It is apparently Pan used to hang out there, Pan and his pipes. So in many ways, it's like the ancient, I don't know, land of the noble savage, I suppose. The land of the free, the land of youth and beauty and wandering in the forest and mixing with the beasts. So this is where Dardanus came from. He then left, I think I'm not exactly sure why he left Arcadia, but nonetheless, he went to the island of Samothrace. I've probably butchered that. But it's an island in the Aegean Sea in between Greece and Turkey, and there he established the Samothracian mysteries. Now, the Samothracian mysteries, this was a cult, one of the Greek cults, but unlike some of the other Greek cults, this was a cult that was open to everybody, young, old, men, women, and it didn't matter what race you came from, whether you were Greek, whether you were, well, they didn't have Muslims back in those days, but wherever you came from, if you were on the island and you turned up, you could take part in this mystery religion and all the rituals that were contained within. So, and this was established by Dardanus himself. And then Dardanus, of course, he goes on, he moves to what we now call Turkey, and his descendants established Troy. So Dardanus is the original ancestor of the Trojans, and then of course after the Trojan War, Annius, he escapes from Troy, he goes to Italy, and fights a big war, and then eventually his descendants, Romulus and Remulus, they establish Rome. And then what do they do when they establish Rome? Because it's just a group of men that went up there and they built this city. Well, they invite all kinds of anybody, like basically thieves and murderers and wanderers and God knows who, and they invite them in to establish the city. So it begins as a multicultural city, a clashing of lots of different blood mixed together, and they establish this two-tier system of the plebs and the patricians, and then they kidnap the wives of the Sabians, and then they invite the Sabians in, and so they have this mix between the Sabian people and the followers of Romulus. So it's always been multicultural, and then of course from there you have the establishment of the Roman Republic, and then the establishment of the Roman Empire, and so many different people living under one empire, one rule, and so many different people pushed into slavery, essentially, by the Romans. And you have an ongoing conflict with the Germanic people who basically wanted to be free from Roman tyranny. And then, of course, after this, when Rome finally collapses under its own weight, you have the establishment of Christianity, and then even then you have another conflict, because how was Christianity established? Well, Constantine, who was crowned in York, interestingly enough, I've said many times before, he pushed the European people down into slavery because he played a huge role in establishing feudalism by binding people to the manor, binding people to the land, and essentially pushed the common people down into serfdom. And then, of course, Christianity erased our ancient history and replaced it with the Jewish history. And then, of course, you have the infringement on freedom of speech because all the pagans got eliminated. So Constantine did a lot to push us down into slavery. But one of the interesting things that happened at the Council of Nicaea is you had Arian religion being rejected. What was Arian religion? It was the religion of Arius. And Arian religion was very, very popular with the Germanic people because it was a more sane version of Christianity in which there was essentially Jesus, as far as I understand it anyway, was considered to be a prophet and different to God. He was not God himself. So, again, the conflict appears. And then, of course, many years later, roughly 1,000 years later, or 1,200 years later, we have the Reformation. And again, the Germans, they rise up. They've had enough of being pushed around by Rome. They want their religious freedom back. So you have, again, a rejection of Rome. And then, of course, we here in England, we also had our Reformation. And then we went on to conquer the world. And we established America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. And all of these lands that we established were very ethnocentric. Why was this? Because the English people, well, the Protestants rejected essentially when Christians reject Catholicism, there is a Judaizing effect in that they turn away from the New Testament and they turn to the Old Testament. And when they turn to the Old Testament, when they're following this idea of sola fide and the Bible, everything's in the Bible. Okay, well, now you're following the racial ideology of the Jews, which is what the Old Testament is all about. So basically what I'm saying is the Puritans that built America, that established the colony, they were racist, so they didn't want to breed with the locals. Whereas the Catholics that went to South America, they were all breeding with the locals, you see. But anyway, point being, the Germanic people have always craved liberty because the German people were always free. The German people would always practice the thing. The thing is the ancient Germanic pagan parliament, so to speak, where people would get together and discuss things and vote. We always craved liberty, and we were always more ethnocentric, and we always have been at war with Rome, basically. So I find it very ironic and very interesting that the so-called hero of the Germanic people and hero of the white race would adopt what is basically a Roman ideology, fascism. And people, I don't know, people seem to just go along with it. People just don't seem to think about all of this very deeply or very seriously. 90 to 99% of pagans you find on the internet think that Hitler is their hero, when he's not, because he didn't die in battle. He didn't take Germanic paganism very seriously. What he followed was this hodgepodge Aryan religion, so-called Aryan religion. Nowadays people call it Indo-European, but whatever. It's a hodgepodge. It's a mishmash. It's myth of the 20th century. It's take a bit of this, take a bit of that, throw it all together. Same goes for Julius Evola. You read, I've only read one of his books. What's it called? Revolt Against the Modern World. It's a mishmash. It's he's talking about a bit of the Veda, a bit of Roman philosophy, a bit of Christianity, a bit of this, bit of that. Throw it all together. It's comparative anthropology. My God, I detest comparative anthropology almost as much as I detest archaeology. Real paganism should be ancestor worship. As I said before, some people they were saying, "Well, what's this guy talking about? One minute he's following Germanic paganism, the next minute he's talking about the Bhagavad Gita." I made a video about it to make it very clear. The Bhagavad Gita says, one of the things that it says is that you should worship your ancestors. This is part of the Varna Ashram Dharma system. This is Vedic. So who are my ancestors? My ancestors are Hengist and Horsa and Woden. These are my blood ancestors. Because I am a Saxon. I am Germanic. And that is why I follow those stories. So I'm not saying I like the Rome, I like Greek mythology. I like the Iliad. I like the old stories. I don't hate Rome. I've never been there. I would like to visit it one day. But it's not Germanic. It's not us. It's not us. And so it is very interesting that so many so-called hardcore Norse pagans like Varg Vikernes, the Golden One, all of these people, they love Moustache Man. Well, why? What is all this comparative anthropology mishmash? Look at a bit of this culture, look at a bit of that culture, throw it all together and just say it's Indo-European. No, you're kind of missing the point, in my opinion. You should know who you are and who your ancestors were and worship them. And because by worshipping your ancestors, you will remember who you are. You will remember your history. This is what I'm saying. Even if you're a Christian, you should respect Woden as a great king who lived in an ancient time. You should respect him. And then you will know who you are. And if you know who you are, and you know your history, it will be very difficult for people to defeat you. Anyway, a bit of a ramble today. Thank you very much for listening.